stories. I was like, yeah. So last week, are you learning etwas in Tanach? Ich weiß nicht. Well, you learn. Okay, no. We'll get all the kashas and al-shals achievers afterwards. They have to start somewhere serious. The problem was like this. This is the problem we're having last week, and we still have it. And I had notes of like organizing it, but the notes got deleted, so it's a problem. So the Nekid is like this. Nekid is, what we were learning last time is that there was a Yid, Rav Saadia going. Heard of him, right? I named my son after him.
Oh really?
Yeah, Saadia. I have a little baby, Saadia Yosef.
Saadia and Ezra is after?
No, Ezra, I didn't name. Was?
Ben Yosef or Yosef?
As far as there was Ben Yosef, but I was Saadia Yosef. So.
Yosef is too well known.
No, and that's different. Again, it was a Yid. But sadly, we don't understand what he's telling us. And we're not sure if we should say that he just didn't understand, he was confused, like the Rambam seems to think, although the Rambam criticized Rav Saadia Gaon explicitly. He mentions him by name only once in all of his writings, but he seems to have been very critical of him. And without his name, he seems to mention him very clearly in a few places, but the Saadia Gaon's Chasidim, like Rabbi Kapach, are very mad at this, and they say that Kenesh Zan and Nacham Mazel he has that the Rambam didn't write his name, so now he could claim that it was someone else. But I'm pretty sure that it was him that he's criticizing. But now the criticism is like this. So no, the Rambam's criticism I'll tell you the problem that I'm having, and then we'll see. So the problem that we're having is Rav Saadia Gaon has a theory of the soul, okay? And we already went through all the reasons how we got to it and so on. I'm not going to repeat everything. But Tachlis Dov is he has a theory of the soul and of the essence of the soul, of what the soul is. And he says something like this. It says the soul is a thing, or etzem, a thing as and more light or transparent or clear as the spheres, as the galgal, the galgalim or the galgal, however you want to call it. That's what he says. And man, you have to come on this side. There's no more chairs. They chairs. So take this. Oh, there's all kind of stuff on it. Okay, so Rav Saadia Gaon said that the neshama. What's a soul? A soul is a thing. He's very important for it to be a thing. That's one thing. Let's get to one side. That's the good side of him that we understand. It's a thing, not an accident. It's not an accident. So etzem, not a mikra. And he has a whole shtickle to explain why it can't be an accident. In other words, a fact about something else, right? So it has to be a thing, an independent substance. But what kind of thing is it?
It's not something the goof has.
Yeah, exactly. Not like an accident of the body, because then the ikanaf community would be, according to most shittas, would be that then it can't survive the death of the body. Although some people have both sides of that dilemma also, but he at least assumes it to be like this. Yeah, so it's not a mikra, and as a whole shtickl arichas, everything he writes is very bekitzra here, so it's very hard to figure out the actual philosophy from his summaries of summaries. But that's what he says. It's not a mikra, it's not an accident of the body or of anything really, but it's a substance. Okay, now what kind of substance is it? So he goes through 7 different shittas, and he comes up with this shit. He doesn't give a source for it. I mean, he says that it's minasaychel and minakusev. It's both reasonable and traditional. But he doesn't, I don't know who he got this from. I don't know earlier than him who says something like this. But Al Kaponim, I know most of the other shittas that he quotes, I know where they're from, because we seem to know where they're from, but I don't know if he took this from somewhere, though I'm not sure. But Al Kaponim, and his theory is, the soul, what is it? It's something very light, a lot of very shiny, we would say shiny, but it doesn't really mean shiny. He says it's light, it has its own light, so somewhat as bohir means transparent, technically. Means right. The Yom HaBor means a transparent day. Just so you know, Ivritat. Yom HaBor. What's the Yom HaBor? Bohir is just transparent. That's how the Rishonim understood it to mean, according to whatever. It means transparent. In other words, it means being able to accept, to receive light, or in the Aristotelian terms, having the potential of being enlightened. That was their understanding of the Galgala, of the spheres, because the spheres are clear, very important for them to be clear, otherwise they wouldn't work, because then we wouldn't see the moon and the sun and so on. But it's a real thing, it's not just a concept, right? It's a thing, at least according to most people. It's a thing, right, that carries, that's what moves the sun and the planets, but it's transparent. So it has this, that's what it is. That the Rambam, they all say this. Okay. You already discussed that the Zohar is named after that. the kids. Anyways, and this is Rav Saadia Gaon's pshat. Now it's very, very old pshat. What?
There's another pshat also, right?
What? Another pshat in Zohar that it's named after?
I forgot.
He said it's incorrectly called brilliance.
No, about spheres I said there's other pshat. That spheres are probably not named after spheres. But the Zohar was named after the spheres. Which I might be okay.
It doesn't mean clear. It means shine.
No, it doesn't mean shine. See, it means something deeper than shine. Or having the potential to shine. Having the potential to receive light. Doesn't actually mean shining. Because the Rekia doesn't shine. Does the Rekia shine? There's something in the Rekia that shines, right? Rekia is nicht shine nicht. But that's the Rishonim all that sort. Right, it conducts light, receives light, and so on. So transparent. Not sure. Rekia kana kerech anoira? Like ice? Is it clear over there? Good question. I don't know. But the real Rekia, at least in the Rishonim, if the Rishonim that translated into the sphere, they for sure understood that to be clear or transparent. So you could look in Ibn Tibban's translation. He says Zohar means transparency, not light. Shine. Akapunim. So the soul is at least transparent, but then he says that's at least that. So really, what is going on here? He has some kind of hierarchy of greatness or of lightness or of
resplendence.
What would the word? Yeah, resplendence, amazingness. I don't know a good fancy word in English. Of being, of matter, really of matter, right? So this earth, very earthy things, then you go up, like you get the fire maybe, which is like higher, technically in their world was literally higher, and then you get the light of the spheres, which is so light, it's not even light, it receives light, and then even beyond that is the soul, because the soul is also intellectual, and the spheres, according to him, don't have their own intellect. Okay, so Akapunim, that's what the sphere is. That's what the soul is, and therefore it could survive the death of the body. Of course, it doesn't pre-exist the body. Very important. That's where we come to the other side of the problem. But this is what he says. And in other words, let's try to organize it like this. So there's one half of his thing where he makes the soul great. He says, don't think it's just an accident. Really, basically means saying that it's nothing, right? Accident is basically something that doesn't really exist. Doesn't have an independent existence. And also, a second important thing, which he doesn't say openly, but he seems to be saying, where he goes through his whole list of different opinions, which one says the soul is fire, one said the soul is air, one said the soul is water. Nobody said it's water, right? Don't know why. Anyways.
So it's water fails, maybe.
He said everything was water, yeah, but he doesn't bring such a shitta. Anyways, one said the soul is, right there, his 6 shittas. One said it's fire, it's air, it's 2 kinds of air, it's blood, and so on. The blood was the water shitta, according to us.
Okay,
Maybe. Anyways, then he went through all these shittas and he was doich all of them. He didn't like all of them. He gives like shvachet ritzim for all of them. But the tzadash, what he really seems to be doing with not being happy with the shittas is that all these shittas seems to be too megishim, too bodily. So and he seemed like is it fire? Well, it's not hot and dry like fire is supposed to be. Well, I don't know. Maybe it is hot and dry. I'm not sure. Like if the soul is a part of the body, then obviously it is hot. Because living bodies are warm and dead bodies are cold. It actually makes sense to say that the soul is a kind of warmth or fire. But what he seems to be saying is that that's why he doesn't like any of these shittas, even the one that says that it's blood, which is basically a pusik, and then there's the pusik maintenance and so on, is that the soul cannot be something as physical than that. And the basic reason for that is because all these things, that's what he really says here. If you read this second time when in this Siman Gimel, where he says what the soul is, he says it can't be anything on this earth, can't be anything under the moon, anything that we know, because those things, the exact thing he says, don't have intellect. So whatever the soul is, it's a thing that conducts the body, that makes it work. The word that I use.
Does have intellect that he's comparing it to.
Yeah, there's nothing really. That's 1 second. We're getting into a problem. Okay. I'm telling you, we're getting into a big problem. What the problem is. But it says the soul, whatever the soul is, it has this power of being able. Power or potential to being able to have intellect, to be smart, so to speak. In other words, to do things, to make the body work. Intellect doesn't have to mean understanding things. It can what it means really is intellect in the sense of conducting all the parts of the body to work and so on.
Rationally or not yet?
I don't think. See, again, I'm thinking too much in concepts, and he doesn't give me all these concepts, so I'm putting everything into him. But I put him not really what Aristotle would call intellect, which is to him the separate part of the soul, because he doesn't seem to be talking about that. Because it doesn't say the soul has intellect because it can understand things. It does say it in the next piece. It says the soul has wisdom, has knowledge by itself. But that's not the knowledge about the body. So that's to another step.
Anyways,
1 second. Right. It has life, but not seichel. Ich weiß nicht. That's what he would say probably, but I'm not sure why. Because maybe it does mean what we call understanding other things. I don't know. It doesn't give me a lot of clarity with any of this. But like I put him, let's go back to this. So these two points are definitely in the part of pushing the soul up out of what we bodily kind of bodies that we know, kind of matter that we know, because the kind of matter that we know can't do that. Whatever it is that the soul does, that the soul has some level of intellect, some level of power that these things don't have. So it can't be that. And that's really for the same reason he said the soul can't be an accident, because accidents are not smart, something like that, which is again sort of a weird thing to say. Like that's not the exact problem. Like, I don't know, but anyway, that's what he says. So and then on the other side of the equation, we have a whole bunch of things. So this seems all these arguments. Let's say all these arguments seem to prove to at least move us towards a kind of separate soul, a kind of unbody soul, kind of soul that's not a body. That's really what all these things are doing, right? But then, if you go on the other side, he has I made a list and I forgot my list. My list was deleted. But he has a bunch of things that make us very clearly think, and that he actually thinks of the soul as something physical. Well, the first one is the actual pasuk that he quotes when he's even saying that is what the soul is, right? He says the soul is a kind of thing like the stars, like the spheres. And he says, how do I know? Well, because of this whole reason. But then he says something else, and it says a pasuk, yeah? And his reasoning is working, like we discussed last time. It seems to be working that it says kizoyer. It doesn't say hamaskilim hen zoyer, right? But he does seem to be assuming that it has to be the same kind of thing, because we have a basic.
Well, at least in the way that they asiru,
right? Right. Because we have a basic rule from Aristotle's categories that says that we don't compare things unless they're in the same category, right? You can't be longer than orange and so on. So you have to have a length in order to be longer than, and so on. And if the soul wouldn't have the kind of light, or wouldn't be the kind of matter as the spheres are made out of, it wouldn't never say the soul is shining more than the spheres. So basically what he seems to be saying, and in his definition that he gives in the logical definition, that the soul is made out of the same kind of matter that the spheres are made out of. Now the spheres are not made of, Aristotle said they were fifth matter. He doesn't exactly seem to be agreed. He explicitly actually denies that in Ma'amad Aleph. But in other words, it's the same level of matter that everything here, but it does seem to have some malice, some kind of level of. It's somehow greater. What?
Where does he assume that it derives its transparency from?
Yeah, so it's somehow greater. It's somehow more transparent than the matter that is that we have here, but it's still matter in the basic category of matter. But he explicitly holds that in Ma'amad Aleph, because to him only God is not matter, very very clearly. So that's also sort of what we get out of Ma'amad Aleph. Right? It's not a quantitative difference, a quantitative difference really, like a difference of degree and not of kind. Right?
Okay.
So right. So that's why if you connect his theory of the spheres, basically the sphere of the universe, and it's very clear to me as far as I can tell, his theory of the universe has nothing in between God and matter. And this is why, because he is a creationist, very strong creationist. Chedesh Olam is his big thing, like Kalam mostly. And he says there's only God. What? There's no malachim. I don't think there's malachim. His malachim are physical. If there are malachim, they're physical. It seems to be. I'm pretty sure that there's like 3 different things that he says about this that contradict each other. It's like about the neshama. But as far as I can tell, like I keep on saying, even the Shekhinah for him is physical. So if the Shekhinah is physical, then probably malachim are also physical. But he must say this explicitly somewhere. Yeah, the Shekhinah is physical. Remember, Shekhinah is physical. Right? Kovet Nivra. It's physical. It can be seen with your eyes. Okay, we will discuss this.
What does it do with malachim?
A malach is also something like that. The Shekhinah is a malach, even called malach. Shekhinah must be greater than malach. Anyways, he doesn't have the separate intellects. Is not something that he has, which are the Rambam's malachim. As far as I can tell, again, because then you get into a whole set of shtalshlis that he doesn't. He's very big against that. He wants there to be God creating the world out of nothing, and the world meaning matter. So he doesn't even have form. Very explicitly doesn't have forms. It does not even Aristotle. Because he has only accidents and etzem and nikra like the kalam. So basically, if you not Plato, like the kalam. Okay. Search it. Based on half of Aristotle and denying the other half. But anyways, and it's closer to historic theory if you want a Greek person that says things like this. But back to where I was saying. So if you take the basic things, so on one hand he's pushing us, saying it's not a body and it's not an accident, but then he goes on to say, number one, this is the first real important thing, and it's probably the most important thing, is according to his basic ontology, his basic metaphysics of what kind of things exist. He sort of only seems to only have two kinds of things, which are created things, anachina matter, and uncreated things, which is only one of, which is God. There's no two uncreated things. According to him, that would be literally having two gods and so on. And there's nothing in between. It's very clear. There's nothing can come out of God, because that would be nonsense, and God would change and so on. Very, very deliberately against. He's very explicitly against all these kind of theories that put something in between God and the world. Then God, by act of will, creates the world, which is matter. And now that matter has like secondary matter and primary. Like there's etzem and mikra, but it's not. They don't really have. There's no like something in between. There's nothing.
About Torah being created before the universe.
No, the Torah was not created before the universe. Of course not. No, of course not. He's against that. Explicitly against that. He's explicitly against that. Yeah, he talks about that pasuk and he says it doesn't mean that. It means he talks about all of these things. He's explicitly against all these things. There's nothing between God and the world. So the pasuk and Mishnah only means that from the world we see that God is smart. That's all it means.
This is very basic Yiddishkeit.
This is basic Yiddishkeit, yeah. Basic Yiddishkeit. That's why I keep on saying. Rav Saadia is basic Yiddishkeit that they teach you in Chayda without all these fancy Chassidische philosophies. Very basic Yiddishkeit. That's true. Not only that, his whole theory of the Neshama is basic Yiddishkeit, as you'll see. I'll give you some more details of it.
That's when the Neshama has to be in
right, because if he explicitly says this, if you, in the first piece of saying this, he says, I've already denied 4 theories of what kind of things could exist, and since the soul is something that exists and was created, it must not be either an eternal spiritual thing, or a part of God, or something in between, or anything like that. He explicitly says this. He explicitly says that Shema can't be part of God, because that would be nonsense. That would be God doing a bad thing to a part of himself, whatever. He has a whole list of things. He's explicit. He says this explicitly. I'm not making this connection between his theory of creation and theory of the soul. He's the one that makes that connection.
Maybe talk about this. What means it's clear that the Neshama, what's going through it? What's going
No, ich weiß nicht. 1 second. No, I don't know. So 1 second. Let me get to I'll try to answer. No, you could say receiving knowledge, but I don't know if that's what it means. Ich weiß nicht. I don't know. You could say receiving knowledge, and he doesn't think no. But I think he would literally say receiving light. Now again, let's get back to this. But first, I'm trying to get the metaphysics over here. So because if there's only 2 things, and if the soul is that can be only of the created kind of things, because obviously it's not uncreated, unlike some Chassidische Sforim. So therefore, it must be a body. The soul is a body. There's no 2 ways out. There's no way out of this problem. And not only that. If you read what he says, and he actually says, okay, now he has a hierarchy of levels of body. That's important. Unlike someone else, which in the end is only in degree and not in kind, if you want to say it this way. But there's a hierarchy of bodies. Like this, he does agree that the sky or the sphere is somewhat more supernal, right? It's a higher body than the earth. We could see it in different ways, right? It seems to have a more. He doesn't say that, but that was what they was assumed. It has a more more stable kind of existence that seems to act in more coherent ways and so on. It never makes a mistake. Yeah. That's what there was theory. These kind of things, why we think, and it receives light, which bodies on this earth generally don't receive light. Besides for glass or magic stuff, most things don't receive light, and even glass is not as transparent as the spheres, because the spheres literally we can't see them. I mean, if not for this, the only reason we know that they exist is because we assume that something must be moving the sun.
Receives light or just flares?
No, okay, so according to the ancient theory of light, in order for light to work, according to how they understood it.
The sphere would actually be conducing it.
Yeah, so it depends on how they understood light to be like something that happens in the thing that gets it or something like that.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's discovered, like you said, from the second source of rational knowledge, from your mind, not from seeing, not from senses.
The people who do a chaymer tzur, they have a second chaymer. He only has chaymer, and that would be the second chaymer.
I don't know about doing the second chaymer. He seems.
They have a chaymer that receives a different tzura, but this would just be a different chaymer.
Right, it's just different kind of matter. Exactly. For Aristotle, they had a different kind of matter entirely, like different kind of matter. He doesn't seem to have that, but he does have some level. He seems to have some levels of matter. Some kind of levels of matter, and he calls them finer. It's more fine, which we're supposed to understand literally. Like in the same way that atoms are more fine than molecules. Atoms can be everywhere in a sense that molecules can't, and macro level things can't. That's something like that. Like light, he literally uses the example of light to explain how God can be everywhere. Over there, I'll tell you that's my source for my faketiv shot. But he says, how could God be everywhere? Well, light can go through glass. I'm just giving you this image. How does light go through glass? Because whatever kind of thing glass is made out of, light is made out of something even more fine. It doesn't black it, right? That's true, even scientific. And that's how he conceptualizes these levels of like hierarchy of. So you understand when you say receives light, it's just like a simon, like showing you that it's a more refined or more like heche. So heche. I told you, my son went to Chayden, and his Rebbe told him a lot of Chassidish masses, and whenever there's a mass that doesn't make sense, the kid would say, so then my son told me that, she's here, he was here, and he told me that the kids were saying, what's the moon is a hechere zach. Now, could have said going, that's true. And the moon is a hechere zach just by being higher, literally, or by being finer, you could say.
No, it's finer.
Right, so it's both, but it's also literally higher. It's true that it's literally higher. As the more higher up you go.
What's the matter that it's higher?
Well, higher is good. You could see everything.
Glass the bottom and tree on top. Glass is better.
Yeah, it's true. It's still metaphorical in some sense. The higher. Maybe, but they do seem to believe that as you go higher, literally, you get to higher levels. So there is the universe is organized in the correct way. The mushal stimmt mit dem you know. So that seems to be his theory of the soul. And as I've said, and that's the only way you can have it be the same kind of thing. Let's say therefore even when he says that it's more than the Galgal, because the Galgal isn't intellectual in itself, but this is intellectual in itself. Okay, so it's something even finer than that. But he still didn't escape matter. Right? That's my first theory, and I think that this is a reasonable theory. I don't think that this is a bad theory to have. I think that most philosophers from Plato on think that this is nonsense, but it's not a bad theory to have. It actually would solve a lot of problems, like interaction problem, and all the problems that we get out of having a separate kind of things, soul being a different kind of thing as everything else. It actually solves a lot of problems, and it's the Stoic theory, more or less, of God, and of the Stoic things that God is also a body, but at least for the soul, you could have that theory, and there were people that said that.
But why is the soul such an important thing?
So Kim, now we get to the problem. It's important because it's the finest thing. What's the problem? It's the most fine.
It's eternal?
It's eternal in one direction. Meaning it starts and doesn't end. Right?
That word that doesn't have parts?
It starts but doesn't end. Right? Now, what is my...
It doesn't start even?
I don't know what Chassidus says.
I don't see this.
They generally do say that it does start, but they don't mean it literally.
Importance is that with body it can only
well, it's important relative to the body for sure, right? Because it's the active principle of the body, it's the intellect, it's what makes people in some sense, and it's what can receive along with the body's charva and so on. It's important. And then just to go on to prove this side of the theory, the lower side of the theory, right? First we showed you the higher side, the up way, and this is the way down. And he literally says, and if you look in Perek, you'll go to Perek, where was it? In Siman Ches over here, I should have made page numbers, I didn't. In Siman, actually, not in Siman Ches, in Siman Vov. And Siman Vov, and so Siman Ches, it's Siman Vov in the old, I made my own numbers because I don't believe in the numbers that whoever made. But in number Ches, it says, Ketzad the Nefesh Yetzes Me'aguf, okay? And he says, after I told you everything, let me tell you how it goes out. So he told you how it goes in, by the way, very important. And this is also a part of him making the soul less than we would assume. It's very important to him. It seems to be, for some reason he thinks this to be very important, that the soul does not pre-exist the body. So there's no, from Mushal, and he says this explicitly, by the way, and he explicitly denies Plato's theory in the symposium, where someone gives the theory of the Du Partzufim, of the circles being split in half, and then that's why when we lose, we look for our mate, because they're literally half of our soul. That's Plato's myth someone said in one of his myths in the symposium, and he quotes that, and he said, this is nonsense. How do I know it's nonsense? Because the soul doesn't exist before the body. So there's no machrizan. Could be Lifnei Yitzchok, could be because maybe that's already when there's some kind of body. But there's no, like in Himmel, there's no neshamas before they were born. There's neshamas in Himmel after they were born, but there's no neshamas before they were born. And all these Amud Chazal that seems to talk about this, he just ignores them. He doesn't even say anything about them. Plato, what? Because again, this is Plato's theory. Oh, you have to know one of my klulim. We are Platonists, and so on, and we think that Chazal, whenever they say things, they probably mean what Plato meant. But Rav Saadia wasn't a Platonist, and therefore didn't assume all these assumptions. And shine. So therefore, it does seem to be the Pshat Chazal that the souls pre-exist the body. At least sometimes there's actually some Amud Chazal that say the opposite. No, it's not true. Because the people that say this, they're stuck with other Amud Chazal. Like it says, in these same Amud Chazal, it says language, L'mushla, Neshomas hasidim li baras. And the Ramban says, because the Ramban is very pro the pre-existence theory, says this doesn't make sense. That means hasidim li baras beguf, but they're really created in Shesh Me'berayis. But see, as the Doichik, Rav Saadia makes more sense in that Amud Chazal. And so on, he has Amud Chazal on his side. It's not like that, it's not. But in general, about? Who has? That's what he says? Remember. The same question? But he quotes a Machlekes Rishonim about this. I don't remember that. That's his pshat. Yeah, I remember that he quotes a Machlekes Rishonim like that. Right, so this is an example. It's an example of something that he denies because he's so sure that the soul doesn't exist before the body. When is it created? At the moment of the body being born, as far as I can tell. Only when there's a body, that's when God creates it. They're very weird. Because then this is one of the reasons that Ramban says it's not true, because the Ramban, also this is the Ramban being a philosopher, not a Makibel, or not a Makibel is a kind of philosopher, but not a Pushteid. When the Ramban says there's no Yesh Ma'ayin since Shesh Me'bereshis, and therefore all souls have to have been born. Yeah, whatever. The first second of Shesh Me'bereshis. And the Tzaddik doesn't seem to have this problem. Yeah, God creates a soul, and very weirdly, because whenever two people come together, and whenever in the maternity ward, there's a God coming and making souls all the time. Like, that's how he seems to see it, and he doesn't have any theory of how this works. It's just God making it, because it has to be Yesh Ma'ayin, and it's a thing, right? It's not something that comes out of another thing. So it has to be. There can't be a mechanism for it, because otherwise it would ruin the whole theory. So that's one thing where it's very important. So this kind, for example, this point where I say that the soul doesn't pre-exist the body.
Right, it says that there's Gimel Shutz involved.
Yeah, but the Ramban will say it means he pushes the neshama into the body, not he creates it. Nish yesh ma'ayin, yesh miyesh. Shals v'yesh ma'ayin.
Yeah, but the other side is a little better.
Yesh ma'ayin.
Father and mother, yes,
Right.
Yes, right.
The father and the mother make yesh miyesh, so I can't do the Koshbach make the yesh miyesh.
Right, yesh ma'ayin. Yesh ma'ayin.
He doesn't punish things to Yesh miyesh. Each of does the
Well,
type
no,
of
there's
thing.
some Shesh Me'besh makes yesh miyesh.
Yesh ma'ayin. Okay, kids. Listen, every shit that has no word chazal, everything you're ever gonna say is Ramban chazal for it. It's not a problem, b'chlal.
Why would you want it to be
doing more?
So why he doesn't want exactly? So this is what a problem. There's a directionality in this. The direction that this kind of thing is going is in the direction of the soul being less, right? Because pre-existence of the soul, at least for Plato, for example, is very clearly what part of showing that the soul is something entirely different, and he doesn't like that. Right, exactly. So that's why I'm saying. Although technically you could have both, it's not technically true, but directionally it's true. Directionally, when you say the soul doesn't pre-exist the body, there's no olam haneshama shalifnei agif. That is sort of connecting the soul and the body in a more serious way. It's sort of, in other words, the word that I have that sort of makes sense is that it makes a person into a soul and a body, and not a soul and not a body, like Plato and the Mekabalim and so on. So although you could have all this shit. This is not technically true, but it's directionally true. It's like bederich. I don't have a good word for this. Understand? So this is making the soul. This is why he's so mad at this. One reason I don't know why he even needs this. I think why does he care about this even? He might say he cares about it because it seems to show like not yesh ma'ayin, but you could say direct Ramban. What is his problem with having the souls exist before the body is created? So it's not clear to me what is his problem, b'chlal, it is. I could say two things. Well, that's one thing. I could say another thing, which he seems to be thinking. He thinks to be thinking that he doesn't like anything pre-existing things when they're not needed, because that seems to go to like what they used to call the Plato's theory, the pre-existing everything theory, where God is only creating the world yesh me'yesh, and he doesn't like any pre-existing thing to anything else, because why? The real question is why. The point of a soul is to make a body alive. And why would there be souls for no reason? That seems like whoever says that, there were some level of souls forever, and that's the ones that got into bodies and got into the world and so on. That's one reason, like could be this oilum kind of reason.
Pre-existing with no reason?
No, there's nothing pre-existing with no reason. Well, you're asking him like Medrash and things. I don't know what he thinks about the Levi Son stories and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. You have to look. I don't think he has anything like this.
How do we know what need is?
That's what I'm saying. I think he doesn't have to. So one of the things that we keep on saying here is that if you read the earlier sources, one of the things they don't have is all of our shadichim that we made together, which technically could work. One of the very important things that we keep on doing here, but this is is that all the theories that we have are shadichim between a bunch of different theories. Okay? In other words, you could take the Ramban. For example, the Ramban, just to be clear, to give this mushal, to be clear, the Ramban's theory, which is let's take the Ramban's as he presents it in Parshas Bereshit. I don't know if the Ramban himself believed that, but the Ramban as he presents it as theory of creation, which is that there's 1 second of Yesh Ma'ayin, and then everything else comes out of that, is a nonsense. It's a contradictory theory. Sorry, it's a shidduch between two theories that have no reason to exist. Because if either you have in the ancient world, and if you read Rav Saadia, when you see this dichotomy very clearly, and including in all philosophy, and even if you read the Rambam about Yisraelim, you see this tension. The Rambam already tries to move his way out, and the Ramban is already assuming that the Rambam meant his solution seriously. But the Ramban's theory there's no reason to have that, to have such a shiluf. Why? Because the shiluf is two things. One theory is, like the philosophical, scientific theory, we call it, that nothing happens out of nothing. That doesn't make sense. That's illogical, and therefore everything has a cause, right? And therefore everything comes out of something. And that theory basically leads you to the eternity of the universe, in some sense.
It doesn't have to exist in time.
What? It doesn't have to be in time. Doesn't matter. But it has to be eternal. That's the opposite. Okay. But there has to be, of course. I'm not getting into that point. I'm just saying the scientific theory of saying where did trees come from? Well, from other trees. And where did those trees come from? From something more basic, and so on. That whole way of thinking is based on a basic thought, which says that nothing pops into existence just like that. Like they always say, cats don't ever give birth to deer. Never happens. So there's some order in the universe and some real causality and so on, and that leads us to, if you want to have everything started from one thing, from one principle, then you sort of get to the first matter and so on, which doesn't have to be in time, but and then you basically stop there. You say that was forever, because otherwise you're stuck with the same kasha, which is something came from nothing, and nothing comes from nothing, basically. Now, if you're a religious guy which has a God that can make something from nothing, then you don't need any of these theories. If you consider, you could have them. There's nothing, technically there's nothing stopping God from creating things out of other things. But there's nothing forcing him to do it either, right?
Today things don't come out of nothing.
Wait, but that's at least how they call it, or some kind of evidence, preponderant, the fact that everything we ever saw doesn't come out of nothing is at least slight evidence for the principle that nothing comes from nothing.
Right, okay. But I'm saying, even
it's an inductive principle. It's a shtickle rai, it's not a hechrech.
The big the Yeshmayim guy is going to have to be masking that it doesn't happen.
No, he doesn't have to be masking. Rav Saadia is barely masking. The Kalam is not. The Hashem does not masking.
New creatures in his backyard,
Of course he does. But you could one second. If you could make shadichem. You could technically. There's nothing There's nothing stopping God from creating things out of other things. Although the word creation is wrong. If creation means Yeshmayim, then it's not creation, but just nature. Then God and nature mean the same thing. Very important, like Spinoza and Rambam said. Once God is the one making things out of other things, then God and when we say the word God, and when Greeks say the word nature, you mean the same thing. Because you're talking about this. Yeah, exactly. The point of God's creation is only interesting if it's doing something that's not nature. In other words, not yesh meyesh. Okay. I'm saying this is not my spiel today. I'm just giving you an example of something. You have to be clear. Therefore, if you have by the way, there were people that were consistent. Rav Saadia might have been one of those people, but at least the people that he's based on, the Kalam people, they were consistent with this, and they said, and not only them, the Chassidus are consistent with this, and the Besalevi is consistent with this, and they explicitly said there is no causation needed, and actually there isn't any. There's just an illusion. God like the Chaznish says, Besalevi says openly in one of his Mamorim that when you pick up something, you're not picking up anything. It's like the Rambam quotes someone else saying, like the Rambam, like the Chaznish said that Teva is just God's minhag. Right? God's most consistent pen. Yeah, God likes, usually when you pick up a pen, God also picks up the pen. In other words, when you pick up your hand, and actually when you want to pick up the hand, and when you move your muscle to pick up that, all those things are not really connected. They're just a bunch of things that God creates at the same time. Or what's called occasionalism in modern philosophy. You could say that, but this is what he seems to. I don't care what the Chaznish said. I'm saying that there's a consistent theory. If you have a creator God, you don't need any nature. There's no reason for it. There's no philosophical reason for it. It might be that God chose to make nature. Kenzan. But that's like a doiche. Why would you do that?
Chachma,
the concept of Chachma leads to, then why would you do Yesh Ma'ayin once even, if he's Chachma? You have to remember, this is wrong.
You might self-defeat yourself if you say that nothing's anything, then your Chachma doesn't count either. But that's what you might self-defeat yourself.
Why?
Because how do you God? Because the Chachma, then you don't...
Right, that's another big, don't tell anyone that problem, okay? Because we're going to, don't tell anyone that, because then I don't know a way out of that.
I think the Rambam pushes it to...
Yeah, I know that. The Rambam's, don't tell anyone that. That's true. There's no proofs for God possible either, if there's in principle something that's from nothing. You have to remember, lots of circular in some sense. But anyways, because we only know that because we have a proof. So then the proof negates itself. Okay. That's why you need a man of Shmitah.
We can still know about him.
No, maybe through revelation. If revelation, it doesn't help. I know. It doesn't actually. Okay, come here.
It's just empirical.
Okay, let's say maybe there's a way out of this. Okay, Bekitzer, I'm just saying is what I'm saying. I'm just giving you a mushal. After there's a bus going back. Okay, now return bus. I don't wait forever. Kitzer. The point being that we are very used to these kind of shalivim, which there's no real reason for. If you read Rambam, you notice this, that there's a real problem. Once there's something that's natural, there's no reason for anything not to be natural, even including Yeshmain. And the real honest truth that there's no real, if you understand Rambam, there's no real reason even religiously to have. Okay, stop with it. And also Mekabulim, by the way. Mekabulim are very clear about this. Some of them. The Ramban's kind of shidduch where he says there's once Yeshmain and everything else. That's only like for religious reasons to say that. Like if you wanna, they say, you know what, a bit like the Rambam does these kind of things. Sometimes it makes nisim. Hello, if he ever once made a nest, then everything fell down. That doesn't really work. The Rambam says this like that, and everyone understands that something is wrong here. You can't have sometimes nisim. If there's sometimes nisim, then nature is not a real principle. Okay. Okay. I told you, technically, I'm asking with you, technically those are possibilities. But there's no reason for a human being to say those possibilities unless he has some Zayed telling him to say that, Which might, like you say, if revelation works, let's stop here. What I'm saying, back to the same thing with his soul. Let's go back to the thing with his soul. If you read Rav Saadia going on the earlier people, you notice, it's one of the things he noticed with the earlier theories. For example, there's no, like Gilgilim and so on. All these things, we could have everything together. You could be a big Shadchan. I call this a Shadchan. It's called concordance and Renaissance. The Ramban was a very big Shadchan also. And the Rambam, they're all Shadchanim. All these people, concordance. Like, let's make everything concord with each other. And Akapunim, Shal is...
To harmonize all sheetas?
Yeah, harmonization. You could harmonize everything, but you end up having no hechach for anything. That's the big problem that you end up with. Because that's why I know, like, I don't care. I'm very happy with harmonization. But the problem with that is that you end up with having just to accept everything on faith. Because the hechrach of all these shit, this is always absolute. Again, technically you could always find a way. But if you want to understand the reason behind anything, then you have to stop with the harmonizations. Then you lose the understanding of the reasons. That's why I'm focused on all these dichotomies. Not because I don't think there's any way to harmonize everything, but because I think that then you lose. You have to understand that, like I'm saying, the concept of yesh mesh. This is the very basic insight of nature. You can't understand that without understanding this. At least at first, in the first generation, when people realized that, this contradicted the idea of creation. You have to at least understand that first level of the soul. And same thing with the soul. You have to understand that pre-existing souls, at least in the Saadia is telling, and I'm sort of extrapolating because it doesn't say this openly, the only reason to have that is if you don't believe in creation. Of course, technically, God could create things today and then use them tomorrow. There's nothing technically impossible. But why? We're human beings. We're assuming that these are human theories, right? Again, if you have a pusik, it doesn't really change anything. But assuming that God came and told you that, I'm not talking about anything. Well, we're talking about human beings trying to figure out the world. Why would anyone ever come up with a theory that says that there's a bunch of neshamas, they're hanging out over there in Olam HaNeshamas, and then God says, Neshama got up, why would anyone come up with such a story? And if you read later, you see why he came up with such a story. Well, he always says there's an Egyptian priest that told me. But then he gives you the reason why he came up with the story. And the reason was because if the soul would not be eternal, for example, one in the Mino, he says, because then we would not be able to learn anything, and so on. So things need to be eternally pre-existent. The whole point of being pre-existent to be eternal, not just be 5 minutes earlier. There's no use in that. Philosophically, there's no use. It might be very nice, and so on, but there's basically no use. There's no reason for it, basically. And again, if you think God only does things with a reason, then you're back just having that as being a real proof. But anyways, so therefore, this is really what Rav Saadia and one of the things you get out of learning things like this is that you start to realize what the reasons were, what the motivations even were. I like sometimes use the word motivation, even might not be technically a reason, but it's a motivation. So the motivation for having pre-existing souls is to have eternally pre-existing souls. And then that answers the Mino's paradox of how people learn anything, for example. And other kind of paradoxes like that, like how life would come out of death, whatever the kind of proofs that Socrates had, and other kind of proofs like that. And then once you say, no, we can't, you have God just popping things into existence, then he might as well be popping it into maternity room. There's no reason for him to pop it in last week. When the Ramban says God only did once yesh ma'ayin, why in the world would he say such a thing? Why, if God could do it, he could do it all the time. And actually the Ramban himself is soiser because he has nisim and nisim tmidim, which are technically yesh ma'ayin tmidi. So why? So these are just happens to be.
Ron says Hashem likes Teva or something.
But these are shadichim. These are shadichim that are lying to each side. These are shekadoi v'kesef noigel people. Okay, they're lying to everyone, saying, God likes nature. Nature is God, and so on. And then they get the two people to marry and to have children, and we're already marrying their iraniglich together with their other iraniglich. That's the level of shtalshlus and machshava that we're up to. But I'm telling you, technically you could make all the shadichim. There's not like they actually got married and they had children. But why?
But if you believe
and it's not only, you see that people notice these tensions, and that's why we get into, okay. If you, Shine. This was all my big detour to explain you why I think that Rav Saadia saying that the soul don't pre-exist the body really probably has to do with his creationism. And because although you could technically have pre-existing souls from Shaish Navaraish, that's useless. Why would something exist from last week? Shaish Navaraish is basically last week. However many thousands or millions of years you want to put it, only relatively last week, right? We need it to be internal. The whole point of it being before the body, in the telling of Plato and these people, is for it to be eternal, in some sense at least, and so on. Because Plato does have the creation of the soul, by the way, in the Tamiyah, so it's not really true. And then all the Platonists assume that that's emotional because it must be eternal. Just to show you why this is like this. Plato does say souls were created, and then all the Talmidim say he can't have meant that. Okay.
Is it possible that the parent's soul makes the soul?
Yeah, not only him, everyone.
The parent's soul that makes the soul?
Okay, but then you got. I don't know that the Gemara that he's quoting says differently.
It's just like another.
No, the Mekabulim have theories of souls creating souls, but I don't know. They probably think of that as yesh miyesh. So you're stuck in the same. You could have souls giving birth to other souls, but then who's the first soul doesn't help us much.
I'm not helping anything. Just to give another option.
You could say that. Yeah, you could say that.
If it's just like another higher level.
You could say that. You could say. Okay. Yeah.
After.
Sorry. You could say, wait. Let me finish my shtickle time. What?
I'll give the soul another importance of conducing souls, not just conducing life.
Then your children's souls, maybe. This is you have to get to a different. It's already after a few shadichim get married each other, then we get to that kind of theory. But then it's interesting. But we have to start from the beginning. So this is, for example, one thing. Now, what other things that Rav Saadia I'm back on track. What other things that Rav Saadia going to say that seems to make the soul smaller? So the next thing he says, very important actually for him. You have to remember this because it's very important for him. Is that when he says the soul is light, and he says, therefore, when you do mitzvah, the soul literally shines. When you do avayis, it literally gets darker. Literally. And he brings psikim, which everyone, or tzadikim yismach, whatever, psikim that describe the tzadikim as being in light, and neresham yidach, the opposite, and they understand this literally. Or at least literally enough that that comparison should work, right? It doesn't have to be a physical light. Yeah, it gets black. And therefore, when a tzaddik dies, his neshama goes up. It goes up, not literally to God, because that can't be, but next to God, as if, so to speak. It goes to the heaven, to the heches tehem, like Leisnish. And Arusha dies, it goes under, somewhere in the lower heaven, or somewhere even into the Re'eh, there it gets. Because he literally made his soul schmitzig, or dark, and therefore it can't receive light, and therefore it's going to hang out in a dark place, or in like a Gehenna kind of place. And maybe there's a fire that could actually literally clean it. K'tzaref, it's like he calls this psikim tzirif, right? Tzirif, which is in the psikim, right? That were mitzaref, k'tzaref, lakesef, like, how do you say in English? Yeah, like when you put it into fire and you purify it with fire. And he quotes all this psikim, and all these psikim he quotes as a proof for his theory of what the soul is. You have to remember, he's not saying, the neshama is hiding, he's saying, what is a neshama? I have all these remuzim together are showing me that my theory is right, that the neshama is a kind of fire, or a kind of thing that can receive light, and therefore can get dirty, and it can get purified, and so on. And then he explains that this is why the neshama has to be born in the body. We'll get to that. But I can put him all these things show to his neshama being literally, at least on some level of literally, a thing like the stars or like the things. Another thing that he says, that's where I was getting you to turn, and before I remind myself of something else,
This is the partial thing of everyone understands it. It's like when
Ich weiß nicht if your children understand. I think everyone doesn't understand this word, this sentence. Everyone understands is a. How do you call a sentence that contradicts itself? Yeah, it's like oxymoron. Everyone doesn't understand. I should this man.
The base one, like assumed understand. Like you say,
ask him.
Yeah, you could ask them. Be Socrates and start asking them. I did this. In the first class where you asked him, he told me what everyone thinks. So you could listen to that class somewhere. We tried to do that already. You could ask them. I don't know. I don't think they think it's literal. You understand? If Sadiq actually thinks it's literal, or at least it can be described scientifically, so to speak. I don't think everyone thinks, yes, this is Ke'ili. They don't really care about what it really means. Okay, now something else that he says that seems to make you think that it's literal, very important. But there's another thing actually where he talks about the end of how long a person could live. He says there's naturally a person has a certain amount of life that he could live. You could make a little more, a little less, but not forever. Okay. Then he says, in Simon Chas, he says, now that I told you all of this, let me tell you how the soul goes out of the body. So I told you how it got in. That's how I got into it. Right? It got in when you were born. How? There's no how. God made it. Yeah. Now how did it get out? How does it get out? So he says like this. I'll tell you the tradition, and he doesn't do a cycle here. Interestingly, he says this is the tradition, and then I'll show you that the Pusik actually says it. This is actually one of the things that you should learn from Rav Saadia going to do very well, to find out of the Psikim a full story, where they're not talking about that. He does this amazingly well, like he's one of the best Baal Darshanim ever. Probably invented most of the Drishim that you know he invented, and including the one with the Neshama becoming lighter and darker. You see, he invented it. You have to understand. Nobody before him says that, as far as I know. There's no medrash like you could find always, but he invented this story and he created it out of like being Medayik, a Pusik do. He's a genius. And this way of like taking Psikim out of context and making stories out of them, he's a genius. I'm telling you, one of the things that I really respect. Now, but then he says, this is the story that I was told. And there's nobody really, this is like a medrash, it's a half a medrash maybe, but it's like a story. Mama Gazug the Maaseh, this is how you die. There's a Malach, okay? And Simon,
Who's he called?
he doesn't quote anyone. You could look at Rav Kapach, he doesn't really know where it's from. There may be a medrash, but more or less the story is just a story that his mother told him. But then he says, well, I was going to get there's a Pusik. He says there's a Malach, and this Malach looks like green light, green fire, okay? And he's full of eyes that are blue fire. Okay, green fire Malach, Mula and I, but what color? Blue fire. All fire. Okay, and then he has a sword, probably made of fire too. And that's all. And then the soul gets so scared of this spooky side that it jumps out of the body. And now you want to know where it says? Let's put all Psikim. Every single word of this is a Pusik. How do I know that the Malach has a sword? Pusik, and David HaMelech, by the Magaifa, and we say it in Tagadish al-Paisach, the Pusik, right? Malach Hashem omed ben Eretz ben Hashemayim v'char b'shluf b'yed n'tiyal Yerushalayim. That's talking about a Magaifa. It's the Malach HaMovis that he saw, right? And open, fetish that it has a sword. Then how do I know that Malachim are made out of green fire? Also, Pusik Yecheskel, the Misachayes, Kigach le'esh b'Eretz. It doesn't say that it's green. But anyways, he just, maybe Yoruk doesn't mean green here, I'm not sure. But anyways, maybe it does have a color. Tarshish is green?
I don't know. I'm working on that. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Colors are a complicated thing. Okay, put him. Let's assume that it's a certain color.
It's somewhat interchangeable. It seems like.
I don't think it means it like
right. So I don't know. It does say. It's not clear. He does. Wait. Suiz can tell you the blue. So I don't know. It's a good. I don't know where it doesn't really explain. We have to be a good question. Then it's Mulei Naim. That's a Pusik. They found him Mulei Naim. So he assumes that that's also the Malach. Then in the eye must be blue.
The same thing. Chayes and I found him the same thing.
According to him, I don't know. According to this shtickle Torah, I can't. What he's doing is something very genius. He's like weaving a whole story out of a bunch of Psikim. And probably the medrash that he's quoting really did that. You have to understand. This kind of thing, I believe him when he says. This is not only him. People, like, I'll tell you, I found it actually Sadiq also. Like this whole story of Rabbi Kespedoi with the God has a scale in a book where he writes the mitzvahs and the virus. That's all Psikim. Every single part of it is a Pusik. You just have to follow the Psikim well enough to figure out. Just a good example of an image very well-known image that you assume is just a medrash, but it's actually a Pusik. Or the Pusik must be assuming an image like that. Okay.
What you're saying, Ruach HaChayes is by font?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how. It's a good question. I don't know. You have to look up exactly. And he has Parishim, all these things, and you could find out.
How does he explain the Malachmo as being everywhere?
Wait, it doesn't. Oh, wait, we're getting that. Then I'm just telling you this because it's fun. Then the eye must be blue, because otherwise, how would you know that it's an eye? It would be the same color. That's just logic, right? This logic must be blue. It could be red. I don't know what was the eye that it's blue. It's a hechlet.
It's a blue. How do you know?
I told you, it can't be the same color as the body, because then how would we see that it's Malay 9? Right, that's just logic, right? And how do I know that you just from seeing it you die? That's a Pusik. Again, Pusik and Sefer Shmuel and David HaMelech, it says David HaMelech felt like he's dying, and it says David Zuk and Baba Yamim because he saw the Malach. Since then he was weak. So even David, that the Malach didn't come to kill him, he was weak. So Kolshkin, if the Malach come to kill you, you die. It's so funny. You die because the Malach, not the Malach Mavis kills you. You die because you're afraid of the Malach Mavis.
There's multiple Psukim.
What?
You're scared he's going to die.
Yeah, but that was by God. Here you have to take the Malach HaMavis. That was about God. Yeah, that was about God. That was about God. We need the Malach. Again, because it was not. Ich weiß nicht. Okay, Shine. Anyway, that's how I know that the story is true. Shine. So I'll tell the Pusik, you die.
The way the neshama can exit the body, or he has other ways also?
I don't know. This is what happens. I'm sure maybe there's other ways. I don't know. This is how it actually happens. I don't know. Maybe when you die naturally, there's different. Ich weiß nicht. This is a story that tells you. Anyway, that's not really what I wanted to get to. What I wanted to get to was the second part. Then he has a kasha. Never saw. I was by a lot. Someone's going to ask you a question. I was by a lot of it. Yes, neshamas. And never saw souls flying. And he asked this question. You see what I'm saying? Hey, off. And the tenets is worse than the question. Okay. And you will ask, look at me. See, this is my proof that the Hantik people don't think like him, because nobody thinks this is a legitimate question, right? So they close all the windows, where this will go out, right? There it says. Didn't I just explain you that it's fine? It can go through the window. There's no problem. It's very small. Sure. Like the dibik, you have to open the window. There's such stories of dibik. I don't know. Sure. So all of this and on this, all of this seems to prove. So all of this seems to prove. Okay, Akapunem, Rav Saadia says that it's true. No, not there is it. Das ist ein Chilik. Ich will dich jetzt vertellen am anderen was. So Kim tells from this is the most clear proof that Rav Saadia literally understands the neshama as something literal, something material, physical, and it even needs to go out somewhere, and it actually goes into a certain place, right? When it dies, then the next part it goes somewhere, and then in order to get schar vanish, it has to come back into the body, because otherwise it doesn't do anything. But that's another whole sheet, not for today.
Where does it go? It says where it goes?
I told you, to the Galgalim, where it came from, to the kind of place thing where it's made, to its friends. It goes in Himmel. Yeah, but it's that kind of thing. It's true, but it's that kind of thing. So it goes with the Balang. It's that kind of, exactly. It goes, hangs out with its friends, you know.
What keeps it in the, what keeps it from escaping the body on a Tuesday?
There's some nature, some hook or whatever, and he actually says that's why it uses up at some point. It doesn't have a very good connection. They'll make the connection very good, but the connection is limited.
What does it do there?
It's God that makes it, whatever. That's what he says. What?
It enjoys things there. It still has a kasei, still has
it only halfway enjoys things. No, might be able to think, but it can't do anything, and that's why we have need chesed. Also a very important thing, that the same story that I told you earlier with the Einikler, with the Shedichim happens, because chesed according to Rambam theology is totally unneeded. Again, technically, nothing stopping it from being true, but there's no reason for it to happen, right? The Rambam noticed this. People notice this for them. Yeah, and you have to remember, I already told you this shit. I already said 500 times. Chesed Ma'asem has no need for existing according to Hantik Yiddishkeit. The only reason, if you go on the street to ask people what's Chesed Ma'asem for, is to see the Baba, right? Never. Then she died. They didn't see her. That's all along.
Gemara says no reason, because Gemara says that's even a
No, that's not the pshat. Okay, that's another whole sheet. That's another whole sheet. What's this minute that they're going on? Because what's the point? And Tachlis, if you go to Levi, the Chesed Ma'asem is the sound of people crying by Levi's, right? Well, okay? That's a good problem to solve. I'm not saying. After the Chumunis, people are sad, their parents died.
What do you meet in the Himmel?
Chesed Ma'asem was invented. I don't know, was invented. The reason for it existing is because, according to the Pshat Tanakh and Pshat Chazal, not only Pshat, Meferish, it can't be more explicit than that, Mesech Sanhedrin, is that it makes no sense to punish souls independent of their bodies. It makes, like the Gemara says from the story of Antonius, it makes as much sense to punish a soul or to reward a soul independent from the body as it makes to punish a body independent of a soul. It just makes no sense. That's the Gemara, right? Right? Remember? So therefore,
They get punished?
to get reward and punishment, right? Yeah, Pusik, Tzadik, hast du Mugalein Daniel? Did you ever read Yeshai, the end of Yeshai? Did you ever read Daniel? It says openly that Chesed Ma'asem will be the last punishment. Some people will wake up to Chesed Ma'asem and say, Lachem Fazai L'Netzach Netzochem, L'Deror No'elam, L'Chol Basa. That's the point. Bis the Val, Hitler died, just died. They got him, I'm on oath, we'll take him out of his bunker over there, and we'll make him back alive and then spying forever. That's what it says. Makes a lot of sense. If you need if a person is the soul and the body, and actually even not, but this actually makes a lot of sense, then the only way for the final reckoning to happen is to have the body resurrect. There's no other way. Impossible, because then it's not him. But it should be us, and therefore Chesed Ma'asem was invented. This is what Chesed Ma'asem was for. And if you read all the Nevi'im and all the Moed Chazal, almost Moed Chazal are already confused, but most of Moed Chazal they talk about Chesed Ma'asim, talk about it in this way. The point of it is that's Olam Haba, by the way, like the Ramah says when he was in Yad Man Sanhedrin and in letters against the Rambam. When Olam Haba of the Mishnah is what? Chesed Ma'asim, right? Olam Habu, the next world. The Ramah by Meir Abelefia.
Oh, remember that.
What's in between?
They're chilling out.
In between is chilling, his freezer.
Freezer?
Sort of, yeah. It's, if you're a tzaddik, you get a nice freezer, but it's nothing special. No point. Yeah, explicitly. If tzaddik one has this theory, that's the standard pusik. That's Chazal theology.
You just go back up and fly up
separate.
Yeah, you hang out in Himmel with Malachim, whatever, but it's not the Ikke. Grad, if you're a tzaddik, you have flieglich, so you go with the Malachim. If you're a Rushi, you're not flieglich, so you have to go hang out with the Malach Chabul. But it's not the Ik, not Schai V'Oinish. When it says in the Gemara, this is what it means. You're going to resurrect and live for a long time, or maybe forever, but at least for a long time. You don't really need to be forever, that might be. But it has to be for a long time in the next world, in the next life, in other words. Like the Ramah says, the Gemara says beferish, says the Gemara, How's the Chesed Ma'asim called? So now, no, this is the Kabbalah. I'm in it. No, I told you the practice push it. This world, it doesn't. The Schar V'Oinish, which the Torah promised to happen, doesn't happen, right? The Rav Yaakov's kasha, right? There's a guy, famous kasha. Yeah, there was a guy that went on a ladder and he to do shliach hakad and he died. Therefore, must be that he's going to have Chesed Ma'asim and then he'll get his schar for doing shliach hakad and kibbutz avad. He didn't realize that he didn't know this text. That's what the Gemara says in Kedushin. Many times.
She had his tefillin or something, came to this medrash with it, and
no.
It says
they said he didn't have it. Right, so yeah, but it's clear. Look, then you die. But it's clear that Olam Haba and the Gemara means this, and the Ramban says I'm not the first. All the Lubavitches know this. That's really the halacha. Like the Ramban, because see this, was gepasken. Was gefragt, and not gepasken. Who asked them? I don't know. But they pass like the Ramban. The Ramban has theories, but this is the reason why the Ramban says it also. If you read Shara Gimel, he says it openly. Shara Gimel is arichas against the Rambam for this reason. Because the Rambam doesn't need Chesed Ma'asim. The Rambam's Chesed Ma'asim is useless. Of course, like the Rambam Shidduch works, because technically God could do everything. Well, could he? But technically God could do everything, and therefore He could make them dead alive too. Okay, but for why would He do that?
That's what I'm saying. Why has enough Torah is because
according to the Rambam.
No reason.
Okay, that's a good pshat according to the Rambam. But according to the real tradition, there's a real point, and if you read the psikim that promised Chesed Ma'asim, they're all talking about this point. There is the Rishonim that die without Konesh, the Tzaddikim that die without getting Schar, and therefore we're gonna have to have a, the accounting the counts are gonna have to be evened out in Chesed Ma'asim. So therefore nowadays we have Chesed Ma'asim plus, the Rambam has a list of 5 theories of what the Schar V'Oinish is in Perishim Shnayis, and we just believe in all of them. There's no reason to believe in all of them. I mean, again, you could technically, there's nothing stopping them all from being true, but there's no reason for having them all. And therefore, most people nowadays don't really believe in the Chesed Ma'asim, if you ask me. Besides for the reason of seeing the Baba. We'll see a movie. I shouldn't do movies. Holograms, whatever. Yeah. Wait. Where did I get for this? A good question. Different machlok. It's not relevant. It's not so important. They might yes and might not. There's some mashmus that they live forever, but there's no. That's the Rav Saadia has the difficulty. He says that they do live forever. By the way, Rav Saadia does have a Chesed Ma'asim to see the Baba. He has 2 Chesed Ma'asims. What?
Why do we do it this way? What's the seichel to do that seichel?
We ask Kashas on God now. Okay, because people can't live. At some point, you end up getting this teretz. Every kind of theory, you're going to end up adding this Kashas of God. But what's your question? Why we die and then because there's a reason. The Father actually has a teretz for this.
Yeah.
No, he has a teretz for this. He has a teretz, but in the end, you can after 2 steps, you can end up with the same teretz. I'm just jumping to that. But that's not the point. Wait. I'm not getting into this. Why did I say any of this?
That's why we're so busy with because we
No, that's Chavanish. Yeah, okay. I said it. Wait. The Kitzur says no. It's solved. 1 second, but that's the Ramban. That's only Mazel. In the end, we have Chavanish solved entirely. Besides, for the people, the Ramban actually solves that also, and really with Gilgilim. Besides the babies that die, and that we solve with Gilgilim, according to the Ramban, and therefore again. But wait. For the real Schar V'Oinish. That's another. I agree. If you have Gilgilim, then that's another alternative there. I'm asking. That's why in India they just have Gilgilim. Right. There's no reason for Gilgilim plus all of this. Gilgilim is a third. Like the Ramban does this like this. We have a hole in this theory. So once you have the new theory, then you don't need the whole old one. That's the real cash on that Shikl Ramban. You understand? Not that we don't have a teretz. If we do have a teretz, faket. To the extent that the tense is good, then why don't you just drop the Havam in it? Why do you end up with accumulating theories like other theories? You understand? Let's say there's Oynish in this world, but then sometimes there's not, so there's only Tchisma. So you might as well have zero Oynish in this world, right? Nothing forcing you to. Same thing if there's guilt and so on.
Can I ask a question on Saadia's idea?
Yeah.
Getting back to the Neshama thing?
Yeah, you have to go back.
Yours point that a soul is when you're born?
So this is a weird. No, right. So this is it does the opposite. According to him, I don't know. The purity is a weird thing. No, according to him, the point of soul. So this is where I wanted to get another thing. The point, according to him, the point of a soul existing, just like really the same point as everything else existing, which is Avodas Hashem. Here is standard Judaism, which again he made up. It doesn't say anywhere. The point of everything, is for Jews to put on tefillin. And literally put on tefillin, not mitzvah sichlias, mitzvah shemias. Maybe. Doesn't really matter, both of them. Anyway, that's the point of everything. And when you do that, then your soul gets even...
What do you mean everything? The whole Bria?
Yeah. Bria Sodam and Kal V'chomer Bria Sodam. And he's the one that the V'nez makes fun of for this theory. So that's how I know that he made it up, and it's not a Mama Chazal. Now, the V'nez wasn't afraid of making fun of Amar Chazal. And the Agdom Malatar, he quotes the Goen is Rav Saadia always, who said that people are created for God, and they said, well, this is just making the question smaller or bigger or whatever. He didn't change it much.
What does he say?
He doesn't say an answer.
So then the mitzvah makes you...
He might have an answer. So wait, finish. So therefore this is...
The reason why he created was what? You should do mitzvah.
Yeah. And when you do mitzvah, then your neshama becomes even more light, and then you get even more...
More from when you were born.
Yeah, for sure.
So
in other words...
Like in between, it get darker than that, or...
Yeah. So he doesn't, the important thing, well, so basically like this. Basically, to him, Tov L'Dosh Nivra, for sure. He has a whole parak about this. No, Shekan Nivra. Because to him, being Lo Nivra, firstly, being Lo Nivra is just not existing, so therefore, like you said from the but then, even if we assume, like, theoretically, like a second before you went into the body, which he does talk about that question, even if you talk about the soul existing, let's say, so you can ask the question differently. Why did God create the soul in a body? Why didn't you just create it directly without the body? And the answer is that then it wouldn't be able to do anything. Souls without bodies can't do anything. For all their greatness, they can't do anything. Because they're created, and all created things can only do things through other things. Klal, metaphysical rule. Okay, that's what he says. All created things do things through other things, through kailim, hanikra kailim, and the soul would not be able to do anything, and then it wouldn't be able to do mitzvahs, and then wouldn't be able to get schar, which is also going to receive in the body because it only did mitzvahs in the body, so it only works with the body. So and therefore the soul being put into the body is a good thing, and it sort of starts in a certain like neutral level. It's not like he doesn't have he explicitly asked this question, but as far as I can tell, he doesn't have a tragedy of Yirid Sanashon V'Gif. There's no such problem, because it wasn't better before, it was worse. And you could make it worse in somewhat if you do Avidus, but then it's on you. That's nobody's problem. That's what he says.
So what a neshama that's born and goes, where would it go? Go in between the neshama?
Where?
How high would it go?
It wouldn't really go. It wouldn't go anywhere. In the end, it wouldn't go anywhere because it doesn't do any mitzvahs.
What?
I don't know. It wouldn't go anywhere because it didn't do anything.
It has to go somewhere. It's physical. It exists.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be like a star. And stars are useless in his sense because they don't do anything. They don't know what's Hashem.
And that person floats around forever. That's like a dibuk. A dibuk is like
it doesn't have the bikin. That doesn't. But it doesn't. There's no such thing. There's no such things. You're asking a theoretical question. There's no such things.
What if a baby 1 day old dies?
Oh no! For him, that gets schar, amazing schar, because it wasn't his fault that he died.
He didn't get brighter.
So it's like you're saying. There's two different questions. I don't know the answer to this. He definitely thinks that babies that die, maybe even not. The thing is, he says it even about animals. That's a problem. It's contradicted. I told you this, full of steers here. I don't have an answer. Rav Saadia because that's asking the question from a different angle, but I don't know where I got to this. For humans, he seems to believe that without doing mitzvahs, there's no use of anything being created. If you ask, like, is it fear? That's a different question. You see, there's a question of justice, which he seems to disengage from the question of avodah. If you ask, is it fear for zebras beaten by lions? That's a very serious theodicy question, and he takes it so seriously that he says that there's the olam haba for zebras. Basically, according to what we understand here, but I don't know if those zebras have a soul even. This is a problem. We already asked this question last week. It's not b'tzad chayva onish. It's b'tzad justice. And the Rambam says, this is one of the things where the Rambam says, one of the Goinim read Mutazilite theology and copied their nonsense, and it wasn't Rav Saadia Goin. According to Kapach, it wasn't, but it actually is this one that says it. But we have to believe him that it wasn't him. He does. He says, no, the Tzaddik didn't really believe that. I just said it.
One second.
But I'll get to that theory. I wanted to get to that theory. Kids, these are his theories. The what? Yeah, right. But Tzchar only works with Avodah Hashem. He has Na'amad Asim as his invention, by the way. Another thing that Rav Saadia invented was Na'amad Asim. Yeah, he invented it. Not he talks about, he invented it. No, those words were made up by someone five weeks ago. The concept he made up. Maybe. He invented whatever. He invented the concept, yeah. He invented the concept. He asked the question, he answered the teretz.
Yeah, so go high.
That you can only get schar if you worked on it. There's no point otherwise. He asked that question.
Tzaddik is no. Tzaddik is
different question. Okay.
Quick question.
Wait,
how's Gilgalim the answer to ultimate reckoning?
The Gilgalim? No, they're not the answer to that. Gilgulim are not. What? For who?
Gilgulim, yeah.
Rav Saadia don't think Gilgulim don't make sense for all these reasons of his understanding of the soul, basically. No, just because then it's not the same person. It doesn't really work.
Style situation.
And he thinks the proofs are not.
Reincarnations, you get your reward and punishment.
Yeah, then you don't need anything else.
Right, you don't need Shema.
I'm just going to get into that.
When he comes back, he can still do mitzvahs and aver. So when's the Engi? How could that be?
You good? You do. In Rav Saadia Chesed we still do mitzvahs.
Even if there's mitzvahs?
Yeah,
so
yeah. Better mitzvahs.
It's not an answer. It's a kasha.
No, because that's the point in some sense.
How do you have
there's
balance if you're always continuing to do what's the Engi?
No, because only the Hashem will die. It's not going to be bechira, not in the same sense. He has this question. He says something. He says something. No. There's only real schar in the one life. We still do mitzvahs and chesed, but just for fun, sort of.
Okay,
I don't know. He says a reason, but you can't do avirus basically. That's for sure.
It's hard to make your neshama bright.
I'm not talking about Gilgulim. Okay, I just mentioned that. That's not a. Yeah. Okay, right. You could exactly. It's a different thing. Only positivity. A kitzer amasa. Wait. I don't know where I got to this. This is just detour. Another detour. Kitzer amasa is that this is his basic theory, and it seems to have very strong pro-embodied people tendencies. Although, like we said, there's two things in the beginning where he pushes us towards disembodied things. Everything else that he says seems to be very strongly pro, at least theory of the person as this. What I see here, that's a person. A soul and a body. A soul without a body is useless, can do nothing, can't get nicht mitzvah, nicht avirus. A body without a soul is obviously nothing, but both together, that's the point. And the soul is great and so on, but that's the interesting thing. And therefore, if you ask him technically what a soul is, it turns out to be a material thing. These are three different points, if you think about them. Now, unfortunately, for some reason, most people can barely believe that Rav Saadia says this. I think that Ramban also says that once, but I told you that's another thing. But most people can barely believe that Rav Saadia actually says that the soul is a material thing. That the soul is a material thing. As far as I can tell, he seems to say it, and like I told you, he's pushing in this direction and a lot of different points that he says, but it seems to be a very weird thing to say. Mainly, the main philosophical difficulty here is that all the proofs that he has for the soul not being fire basically can only lead to that. You can't say the soul is not fire because it's not wet and whatever, dry and hot, and then say, well, it's something else, and then, okay, what kind of nature does that have? I don't know. It doesn't seem to, or the same thing, you can't say, well, the soul can't be part of the body because then it wouldn't be smart. They say, but it could be a different kind of body. Okay, so what exactly is the point? Then you might technically be able to do that, but it seems to be a difficult thing to do.
You do have to establish.
You could sort of do that.
Not only qualitative, but also absolute.
Yeah, it seems to lead there. It seems to lead directly to a different kind of thing, and not to just a different kind of body, a different degree of body.
Then it's not a body.
Yeah, at some point it starts being a body, and then you might be able. Like also, I'll tell you what. Okay, this is a problem. Anyways, most people. Okay. Ich weiß nicht. You could play this all these ways. Let's just try to list the ways that we could play with it, because I already did a lot of this. So what we could do is a few things. First, you could say that this is what, for example, the Rav David Cohen, the Nuzir, has a Perush and a Mitzvah Dais, and Befrat in this shtickle where he tells the story of the Malach HaMovis, he goes like, the Rebbe never meant this seriously. Can't be. And shine. And he stops there. And not only him, it seems like most Handicap people that already have said they're going to do. So he's doing another mushal. But as I tell you, there's good reasons for thinking this. Actually, he's not crazy. There's actually good reasons for thinking that. That's one opinion. Okay, he means to say just getting emotional to explain to kids, something like that. And then the whole story of the light and the spheres is all emotional also, That's and there's it really doesn't mean that. That's one direction that people can take, and I think that there's a reason. I'll if you'll give me time, I'll explain you why I think there's a live option. Unlike what I said last, this is where unlike what I said. Another thing we could do.
There's a million other things that are also aren't material, right?
Okay, that's another question. Another thing we could do. Wait, I'm just listing things that we could do. Another thing we can do, which would be interesting, is to do what you say. And I don't think anyone has a fleshed out theory of that. Maybe the Stoics do. But nobody really knows what the Stoic theory of anything is, because all the Stoics writing were destroyed, and there's only like Talmidim, which are mostly focused on ethics. Stoic physics are more or less unknown, although they seem to be a big influence on Kabbalah through all kinds of backwards
Which one?
paths. No, what was the real Stoics? Yeah, the one that did physics and logic. What's his name? Seneca's Roman Stoic, the Chrysippus and the Zeno or whatever. Okay. Those people, they had physical theories of everything, according to what everyone agrees. And they believe that God is a body and the soul is a body, and it didn't bother them to say God is transcendent. They had everything together. And the Mekabulim, at least the early Mekabulim, seem to say theories like this. They do another thing that the Mekabulim somehow got from the Stoics is the Shmitah's theory, the classic Stoic theory. Shmitah's, okay, that the world is created and destroyed in cycles. Okay. There's broader Greek theories of that, but it's the Stoic version that the Mekabulim
actually got it from them. They didn't get it.
Okay, Kenzan. I'm just saying the first written down version. I'm sure that there's the opposite. No, seriously, there's actually. Okay. I'm just saying. I told you I don't care who stole from who. I care to understand why people say these things. And when you go, what I'm interested in, that's why I'm told you. I don't even care if you make shadich when you say everyone is right and bechina and so on. But the reason I say it's a Stoic theory, because if you read the Stoics, you see they had arguments for these things. There's reasons why they said all these things, right? It just wasn't just apikabula, or the PMN, and that's useful to understand what's the motivation, what's the point of any of these theories, right? But otherwise, it could be that they stole it from somewhere, and they themselves, the Greeks themselves, claimed that their wisdom was from Egypt, like I tell you. So who knows? Anyways, where was Moshe from, right? Yeah, according to Greek mythology, according to Greek Socrates myths, all of his chachmas come from Egypt. That's the Greeks themselves said. So it's actually not Greek to think that the Greeks made anything up. Well, that's another shir. And sometimes they say from the east. The Greeks got their language from us, right? Their alphabet from us, from the Phoenicians.
Yeah.
Anyways, so it's true. And on some level, it's true that all Greek wisdom is really Hebrew, or at least Canaanite.
You go from right to left?
No, the name to that.
No, but their alphabet, they had an alphabet before that, right? But Messinian alphabet, but the second Greek alphabet was achilic, but it's the same alphabet. The second
one's not, right?
No. The Greek alphabet, there's only basically one alphabet in the universe. Okay, Ketsar is that Ketsar is that there is one thing. Okay, so listen. That's one thing I could say. You could say this, or you could say even more complicated things, which is like, what is the body anyways? And all these definitions of body are just Aristotelian definitions, and we don't have to buy them. And Aristotle didn't really read much of Aristotle, so he didn't even know them. So we might as well say whatever we want, basically. Okay, that's one position. Then there's another. So that's already two shittas. One is that he didn't mean it seriously. Really, he was a Platonist, basically, or Aristotelian Platonist, which he officially definitely isn't, but really kind of a Platonist in the sense that there's dualism, right? Different kind of substance and so. But he didn't tell anyone, But that, at least let me say this. Let's say something about that theory, because soon I'm going to try to promote it. But I have to say, what I explained, that he's definitely not an ethical Platonist. Very explicitly not that. He definitely believes that it's pretty good to live in this world, and there's nothing wrong with it. And there's no reason to go anywhere else. And in the end of his book, he has a cipher called the Precious Ashleima, the full Precious, very beautiful. Everyone should read it. The last Mammon of Amen's V'dais. And he does like kind of keheles, where he goes through what can we do? What can humans do in this world? And he goes through all of them, and one of them is Avodat Hashem. He says, yeah, that's a good thing, but not the only good thing. And he goes through eating. Yeah, eating is good, but not too much. Basically, that says about everything. So basically, there's 13 of them, 13 different things that people can do, and you should do a little of all of them, including a precious, and including Avodat Hashem, and including caring about your soul. So he's definitely not a Platonist in the sense that we should only care. He doesn't think that, like, the main thing of Socrates, which you should only care about your soul and not about your body, he definitely does not agree with that. So he definitely doesn't have Platonist ethics, which is Zoya's ethics, Hasidus ethics. He definitely doesn't have those ethics. He might believe, so even, which is the real motivation for people to even care that the soul is not a body, is the moral part. Okay, learn Tanya. Now, the whole Tanya says this. Kitze, ich kann nicht gesagt. Ich kann nicht alles auf einmal.
Tanya is the anti-ghost.
100%. Yes. 1 second. I'll put him.
We start off with the non-existent, now exists.
Yeah. Wait. Rav Saadia is so. Wait, I have to finish. I can't but whatever. I have to get. Wait. The Tanya says explicitly in Perek Lamed Beis. No, the Tanya says in Perek Lamed Beis. Matoras haTorah lahagrid neshama laguf. That's enough for me to say what my shir at least. Okay, you want to say that poimik in the end. I know, but like that's what it says in Perek Lamed Beis. It says in Version Tanya that the point of Torah is that this, Socrates' horse that goes to heaven should win. That's what it says in Tanya. And the whole Tanya is about those two horses, which equals two souls, which is Plato's theory, like most classic Platonic theory that could even be. Now,
negated guf.
Okay, Al Kapunim, he wants to be Machnia. Plato also wants. Doesn't matter. Plato also wants to go up to heaven also, and then doesn't matter. These are dakas. Again, you're doing the same thing. There's a shidduch to be made. They eigentlich can marry each other. Like the building was Hashem's enclave already got married, and they might have that they're all confused. But now we're talking about what the first thought said. Okay. Now the kids said Rav Saadia going. Let's say something like this. Rav Saadia going. The Baal says, "Well, okay, I'm stopping to say random things." Rav Saadia going. Rav Saadia definitely did not think that the neshama is trying to get out of the guf in any sense. He didn't think that you should daven because your neshama has an aish that wants to get out of the guf. He explicitly denies that. He says this is false. This is not true. Okay, the neshama it's good for it to be in the guf. It's perfectly fine. God put it there, and God never does anything wrong, even for the shu. No, it's perfectly fine. Okay, and there's no reason to even think that it's wrong because it was only created then. Like you have to understand, it doesn't even make sense to say it. No. So ethically, he's definitely not a Platonist, which is why there's not really any motivation for him to become a Platonist philosophically. The only motivation is that some of the arguments that he makes lead there. Okay, at least to Aristotelian, and he's definitely not Aristotelian for this all. I'll put him at least on the way. Okay. Now the third thing that is important that I have to say, and this is what I think the Rambam said about Rav Saadia Gaon, again without his name. So it's not nice to be Megal all these this. But I can put him the Rambam. This is what the Rambam has to say about Rav Saadia Gaon, and I'll tell you what I think. I think he says it's fetish, but again, it doesn't mention his name. The Rambam in his book says that one of the points of the book, if you read Akdama, he has a few points. One of it is to tell us what's going on with these Kalam people. That's in the preface of my undergrad. Okay, the student Rabbi Yosef, he studied. This was like the classic Muslim / Jewish theology, rational theology, right? And he said, I want to. And he says, you ask me, what's the story? Are these really proofs? Are these not? What's going on with these people? And in order to answer this question, he wrote, 10 chapters in the end of Chelik Aleph, from Perek Ayin Aleph to the end. And what he does over there is an amazing thing. First he does, this is the Kalam theory of everything. And he gives us 12 basic axioms of Kalam. And he says, this is Kalam. This is important. If anyone tells you that it's Kalam without one of these assumptions, he's just confused. That's what he says. Because nothing they say could work without anything else. So he claims you need a whole atomic theory for the possibility to work, whatever the Torahs are. For anything the Kalam says, you need all of this whole worldview. The Rambam is very interested in having everything is consistent in the catalog, So this is the Kalam worldview, and you need all of these 12 things in order for any of it to work. And then based on that, you have proofs for God, and proofs for the universe, and so on. And now, of course, the Rambam thinks that all of these, every single one of those, almost every single one of them, maybe one or two, almost every single one of these basic physical, metaphysical assumptions are wrong, and therefore nothing they say is true.
Does he cut it up into the schools?
No, he has no schools. He has Asherat later in Gaba Ashgoch. He has these two Kalamite schools, which are Asherat and Tazlite. And in the basic physics, he thinks that they both agree. That's important. He thinks that they both. There has to be one base of how they understand the world. And there's actually some things that even before that everyone agrees on. Like when you have to agree with he doesn't. He ignores this. Nobody really knows. There's a whole nobody really knows who exactly. There's not even basically, according to what I understand, there's no one guy that Rambam copied this from. He has a better version of Kalam than the Kalam himself, because he's a better systemizer.
That they don't have, like he says about them.
Almost everything there is. If you look, Schwartz wrote good notes on that Pirate because he wrote a whole article about it. Almost everything there's someone that says. Some of the things.
But one of the things
could be, but in general, what's
occasionalism.
Ich denke nicht. No, for sure. What seems to be going on is that the Rambam thinks that to be a consistent kalam, this is the real problem, right? The Rambam has a problem. He wants to criticize kalam. Now, Rav Saadia was one of the people that chula chuli kalam, right? That's the language in Shmitah Prukim. And he quotes Rav Saadia over there because he talks someone that said that this mitzvah sichli is a mitzvah shemiyas, chula chuli kalam, and said that. And he's sick with sickness of kalam sickness. And then this Rabbi Kapach says, mitzvah shemiyas is chazal. But hello, you have to read what it says. That's what it says. And the Rambam is ascribing this, and of course, this whole thing, he's ascribing this to the kalam, and he says that some Jews never got, caught their virus and said things like that. And right, and more. The Rambam says that, so now there's a big problem. The Rambam wants to criticize them. That's very clear from what's going on. He wants to say that this doesn't work, this whole shit doesn't work. Now, in order to criticize someone, you need to pin them down, right? You need to say what he believes. Now, this kalam, very hard to pin down. And like the problem we have with Rav Saadia here. He says one thing, and for example, Rav Saadia is a classic case of someone that more or less is working within kalam metaphysics, but does not accept some of the most important assumptions that the Rambam reads there. And again, Rav Kapach, and for this he's right. In his list of things where Rav Saadia is not a kalamist, he has a good list of things. He's not an atomist, for example. He does not believe in occasionalism. He does believe that there's an order of nature, very explicitly. Well, not exactly. He definitely believes that that we should trust our senses. That's the word that I would say. He definitely says that openly. In other words, in his whole epistemology, in his psyche, he's very rationalist. Not kalam, where you can't prove anything, according to the Rambam. So this is a contradiction. He's not a consistent kalamist according to the Rambam. The problem is that the Rambam would tell you, what the Rambam would tell you is that then you're just nothing. Then you're like, you just don't have a theory, so you can't be criticized. Thank you very much. No use in that. Really, you believe in atoms and you believe that senses can be trusted, because that's where your theories lead to. Now, the fact that you don't know about it just because you're a bad kalamist, that doesn't mean that I can't criticize. So this is the Rambam's theory, and as far as I can tell, this is his theory of Saadia. Rav Saadia does all these kind of contradictions, and the Rambam thinks he's just not being consistent. Maybe he's just doing it for polemical reasons, or he doesn't really care about it, whatever the teretz is. And therefore, if you really want to, and the Rambam actually explicitly criticizes the kalam theory of soul, and he says something like this. He says, according to kalam, the soul, they are very busy with soul not being an accident, and they end up with soul being an accident anyway. Now, of course, no kalam would agree with this, because they're very interested in the soul being real. And the Rambam says, no, you're just stuck, because according to your theory, there's no way out. And this, more or less, is not exactly, I can't say the whole sheet of that. Whatever they are, and I don't know, but that's what he says. Because there's only atoms and there are accidents, and therefore the soul must be an accident of any atom in the body, and therefore you end up with the soul just being an accident of some part of the body. That's what the Rambam says. And therefore there's no knowledge really, and so on. There's really, everything is random.
Right?
What?
First order accident, right?
What do you mean? Okay, yeah, there's only first order accidents, like we said. There's no accidents that have accidents.
Human having two arms is one kind.
No,
blue eyes is another, right?
No, for them there's only one kind. That's very important for them.
So he doesn't have second order accident.
No, of course not. Okay. So that was one of his proofs. This is what the Rambam says, and as far as I can tell, he's criticizing Rav Saadia. Rav Saadia is the one that has a theory of the soul being an accident of a certain atom. Because you have to remember, this is what seems to be going on. And again, the Rambam never says his name, and the whole Moed Nevochim is not mentioned. And the only time Rav Saadia is ever mentioned by name in the Rambam is to say a nice thing about him, and then argue with him and say he was wrong. And the Gerus time. So, I don't know, but he definitely read him and was influenced by him, and he definitely means him or someone else who, Shakespeare's cousin was also named Shakespeare and wrote all of his books, what's the difference does it make? Now, and the kids, this is what he says, and as far as I can tell, he's really getting at the problem that we have in different metaphysical framework, not exactly the way I said it, but he's basically asking the question, if either the soul is a different kind of thing, then you lose your entire metaphysics, because your metaphysics doesn't have room for that. That's how I would say it. Or the soul is a piece of sphere. Okay, let's say it's a piece of sphere which is in your body. So what makes it soul, right? Whatever makes it soul is either something about that, then you're back to accent theory, or it's something different, then you're not your theory. So basically, what?
If it's its unification with the body, that's also accidental.
Yeah, right, of course. That was one of the 5 theories of accident that Rav Saadia recounted. So basically saying that your theory doesn't work on its own terms, and you're just not, if you're confused about this, that's because you're confused. I can't help you. So this is the Rambam's theory, and I'm sadly very annoyed to that being the truth, because Rav Saadia just doesn't tell me what his basic metaphysics are ever, so I cannot really tell you more than that, He definitely says all these inconsistent things. Now, I just have to say that there is a reason, but if we do want to be mad at him, but there's a reason to think that he's not being serious in all these Meshulim, and the reason is what he does about God. And the kitzur that what is the Rav Saadia very explicitly, and not only so. There's two. I'll tell you in two steps. Rav Saadia both explicitly gives imaginary ideas of God to people, and he has no problem with doing it. Unlike the Rambam, which tries his best to not do that. Rav Saadia explicitly pro that. Both in the theory of why the Torah says has God have a body, but I'll skip that. But at least in the big example that I like using is what he says about God being everywhere, which is where Chassidus got one of its confusions from. No, anyways, I told you about this, right? Rav Saadia was the one who invented the concept of God being everywhere, and he says explicitly that he doesn't mean it literally, because God isn't anywhere, according to him. So he says, but that's just another way of saying he's everywhere. In other words, really the correct language to say would be he's not anywhere more than anywhere else. So he's as close to you anywhere as he is anywhere because he's not close or far. He's not in space. But I'm in it. The Ravid and not the Ravid, the Rav Kayach and the Chassid Ashkenaz all talk to Rav Saadia explicitly. I'm not making this up. And then Rav Saadia says something like this, and someone will ask him, how could it be? How could something be all over? This is all look about. Light is all over. Remember our story with the soul? Light is all over. Ear is all over. So God might as well be all over too.
He's explaining the pshat to explain the mashal, not
he's explicitly giving a mashal, because of course God is not light or ear. But he's explicitly giving a mashal. He doesn't say mashal. But if you read like the two paragraphs, they're like one after the other, more or less. There's no way to read it otherwise. He's saying, I know that God is nowhere, and therefore is everywhere, if you want to say it that way. But since you're stupid and you need a physical mashal, I'll give you one. There's nothing. He's trying to doing something like being mekadev l'sechel, what we call it. There's nothing really. It's not. You tell me I'm crazy. I'm not crazy that I say something is everywhere. Because look, ear is everywhere, light is everywhere. Light goes through glass. Why can't God go through everything? That's basically what he's saying. Of course, God doesn't go through or anything like that. The whole question doesn't really start if you even begin to be a philosopher or anything like that. But that's what he does. And the Chassid Ashkenaz take over this image from their translation of Rav Saadia and run with it very far. They also understand that it's a mashal in some sense, but they focus on the mashal very much. They're very interested in the mashal, and this is connected also very much. And this is also something that's not in the Mitzvah. It isn't. This is in the Rav Saadia's Pirush on Sefer Yetzirah, where he has God doing this. You have to remember that Rav Saadia's God does this. Not only does he do it, God does it, right? Because Rav Saadia, one of his solutions, or his big solution for God being seen in the Bible was Kavod Nivra, right? Major invention of Rav Saadia, one of his best patents, was Kavod Nivra. Kavod Nivra is just a created thing that you can literally see, at least imagine, but you could also literally see it physically, whatever that exactly means. And it's Shechina, Hanikra Shechina. And when God wants to show you someone because he understands that you're stupid, and that's not what he says, that's what Ram would say. But when he wants you, according to something, when he wants to prove that he's talking to you, then he's going to show you some cloud or some light, literally a cloud or a light, nothing more, nothing less, which is directly created by him. And so it's kind of a ness, and therefore it proves that God is speaking to you, and you could say, I saw God, basically. Yeah, a burning bush or a cloud, as it says in a lot of psukim, or a fire, or anything like that. That's what he says. And then in Sefer Yetzirah, he explains the Sefer Yetzirah this way, and he says that that's ear, what the Sefer Yetzirah calls Riach HaKodesh, first ear. So this is literally a historic theory, by the way. There's two levels of ear, little plain ear, and the Tzaddik quotes it, and the Nahis it about the soul. But anyways, there's plain ear, regular ear, and then there's like ether, right? The special ear, and that's God. Maybe it wasn't meant literally either. But anyways, they covered never, exactly. The Shechina. But that's everywhere. It's like thinner. He says it's thinner than ear, but it's like, if ear is everywhere, then that's Kolshkin everywhere. It's even in vacuums. I don't know, there's no vacuum. Anyways, that's his theory of the Shechina. Yeah. Avi Kadmon, you ever heard of Avi Kadmon? That's where it's from. That's Rav Saadia invented it. Daksha B'dak, it's physical, and it's the Shechina. That's Rav Saadia's Shechina, it's like a fetish. Yeah, Avi Kadmon is all over. It might be sometimes revealed in some way. Like that's something. This is weird. And in Sefer Yetzirah, there's two Shechinas in Rav Saadia. There's like a happens to be Shechina, which has to be happens to be, because otherwise it doesn't prove anything. Then there's a steady Shechina, which is Avi. There's explicitly two, and we have to figure out. But he has two theories of the Shechina. Avi Kadmon, which is Kesed, is the steady Shechina, not the Shechina that reveals sometimes yes, sometimes not. It's always there. And the Chassidei Ashkenaz, which were very interested in seeing God, they said, okay, God can't be really seen, but we can see all these kind of things that he created to see, and we're going to try to look for them. And that's where we got to focus on these kind of things. And we also got the Baal Shem Tov's idea of God being everywhere is some kind of Yiddish from that. Well, they also had a whole detour through Tzfas before that, so I don't know. what did I say? Now, this is a very good example of the Rav Saadia and his God doing explicitly what Rabbi David Cohen claims that he's doing about the soul, right? He's giving you an image, which is false technically, but he's happy with you having this image. This strategy was explicitly said by Ibn Rushd about God also. The Rambam denies this explicitly.
The second one is false. The first one is true.
The first ear.
There's a light in the cloud.
Yeah, but it's not God. It's true that there is such a God, but when you're seeing it, you're not seeing God. You're only seeing something that shows that there is a God. Yeah, that's what the Pusik says. Ve'eres Hashem. Ve'eres Hashem is only somewhat true. That's what the Ramban gets stuck on this theory. He doesn't like it for theories like this. Wait, so Averroes has a theory that says something very similar, where he says nobody understands God not being a body. If you tell them that, they think there's no God. So therefore, we're going to tell them God is a light. And he comes up with this idea.
Says this?
Yeah, and some of the Rambam's Chassidim are very happy with this. The Rambam is explicitly against this, more or less thinks that this is not a good idea. But some of the Rambam Chassidim, which were more philosophers than him, said that this is a good idea. And this is Rav Saadia what he's doing, basically. He was before him, but it's very similar.
Materialist understanding.
Yeah, it's true for God for sure. He definitely doesn't think God is material. This is actually what the Chassidim Ashkenazim were criticized for this by the Metaphorical and so on, right? The Shira Yichid, which says that God is everywhere, was criticized. You know why? Because he said that God is not a body. Not because he said that God is a body. Everyone is messed up. Okay, and Metaphorical was against Rav Saadia and the Rambam, mostly Rav Saadia because that's what he had read. He didn't really read Moreh Nevuchim. He read Emunis V'Tayis in the Ashkenaz translation, and he says Rav Saadia says that God is not a body. This is not true. And then he quotes this piece. The Sardam says God is ear. What? God is ear? He's just a body, and you could see him and so on. He's not ear. And he doesn't, whatever, I'm not getting, but he explicitly criticizes this piece. And therefore he says Shira Yichid is wrong, because Shira Yichid says that God is everywhere, and Sefer V'Kalam, Malach Kalamim, and that's who invented this language, by the way. And no, the Shira Yichid, the Shmuel Chassid, or whatever, or his cousin, whose name was something else at Chassid. What's the difference? What? Yeah, it says those words. Not in Aramish, Lashon HaKodesh. And the Moshe Dako says this is wrong because this is not having God, this is philosophy. And then some Chochem, in Ashkenaz much later, found this book called Ksav Tomim, and it came to the Marshal. It's amazing. To the Ramu, the Chivas. Marshal was Maskim. Then he came to the Ramu and told him, I found the old book, it's criticized Shira Yichid. The Ramu and the Marshal, that's Chivas, I remember who said this. And the Ramu says, or the Marshal, I'm trying to remember, it's in Chivas Marshal, the Ramu. And he says, hey, the Rambam said that sometimes people find the old book and believe it. And you know what the Rambam said. Anyways, not just you found the old book, so what? We're just going to continue to do what we said. But anyways, then if you read later, they keep on saying Shira Yichid is like Shema. It's just the opposite. Shira Yichid is the opposite of like Shema. And that was why it was criticized.
No, even Shlomo he writes against Chabad based on.
And they're being too much offshoot. Yeah, the kids are the guy upside down. Actually, kids are Inyan is that this is a very good example of Rav Saadia giving a mushal or an image, and maybe a physical thing, like you say, it might actually exist, because it might even be true. He's not even sure. His whole perish of Asaf Etzir, it says clear, this is just speculation, other 9. But it might even be true that in some sense the first thing God created was ear, like the Ramban has in the Aristotelian perish, which is another mess. But upon him, it might be even true. So in other sense, because the real interesting thing about the Kavod Nivra is that it's a nest, in other words, directly created by God. And there was something directly created by God. Maybe it's everything, or maybe it's just some things. He's in Sefer Yetzirah, he's not sure about this. And generally, he wants everything to be directly created by God. But he might be happy with having it going halfway, like the Ramban, and having the one thing creating God, and then that would be the Shechina, or that would be the Kavod Nivra, and that would be the ear, the Heilige ear, the Aver Kadman. And B'kitzur HaMaaseh, but even if it's true, it's still a totally created thing. There's nothing special about it, right? It's only an image of God, if anything, and God gave you that image. And B'kitzur HaMaaseh.
It's like Atzilus.
No, it's Yesh Ma'ayin. He's explicitly against Atzilus. He says Atzilus is not true. It doesn't work. There's nothing between Yesh and Ayin.
Why can you make a Vajazara then?
No, we could. What do you mean?
Make no representation of Hashem then.
No, you could make a representation. Who told you can't make a representation of Hashem? Where did you get that from? From the Rambam? The Rambam was born 100 years later. No posik that says that.
Because don't make a matzeva from you.
Oh, that's dumb. It's like you shouldn't wear tzitzis of 3 strings, whatever. What's the difference?
But answer me, so there's nothing inherently wrong.
So God himself made the representation of himself, and we make krivim and so on, of course. Nothing inherent. Well, for his chair, what's the difference? Either for his chair or for him. I don't see the big difference.
What would be
two of them?
I don't. There's two. That's what the Rambam says. Amazing. Now we know there's only one God, and therefore it's not. I don't get it. Akapunim Amasa. What's Avodah Zarah? No, Avodah Zarah is if you believe in Kadmas Adam or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what Rav Saadia's theory of Avodah Zarah is exactly. But this is the Rambam's theory that you're saying.
Yeah, I know.
Akapunim. It's definitely true.
Say it's Baal.
No, that's not the Shechina. I don't understand. If it's not, then there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I don't know. He does.
It's the wrong image of Hashem.
The wrong thing, right?
No, it's not the wrong thing. It's not. This is really image of Hashem, and that's not. It's not. It doesn't look. He doesn't look that way. Well, he didn't show. No. The real answer is that he's not.
Image of a non-physical thing.
I don't.
Image of a non-physical thing. Art says you could go out and do it. So
No. 1 second. No, yeah, that's not the truth. The truth is that Rav Saadia has no problem with Avodah Zarah in that sense. Avodah Zarah Pshat, and anyone that read the Chumash knows that Avodah Zarah means you believe that this is the God. The God that created the world. No, the Baal never actually believed that, but that's what it says in the Chumash. Okay, the Rambam was too smart. Everyone is being too smart over here. And you learn Chumash, you go on Chayde. Avodah Zarah is the andere God, okay? That is Avodah Zarah. Loy Puchas, Loy Yosef. If you have the same God, but this is a mushal, then it's not an andere God. I don't know what you people want from me. Okay, if everyone keeps on saying, this is the Pushta Pshat, and any other Pshat is wrong. Avodah Zarah is a different God. If it's the God, we call it Zias, who cares what you call him? What difference could it really make? There's no difference. If you call him Baal, also, the Edelmai, according to the Chumash, the Baal didn't think he was the same God. If you think it's the same God, then it's not Avodah Zarah. And then the Pusik that says this in the end they realized that in Nevi'im also, and they said B'chol Mikra Megish L'Shmi, and that's how the Gemara understands it. Even I'm not the only one. Actually, the Gemara understands that's at lower level. But actually, I don't know where we got this. Of course, you're allowed to. According to Chassidus, I said this. Okay, because according to this, the Shira Yichud definitely thinks that God is not a body, and you should imagine Him as having a body. You should.
You should.
Yes, you should. Maybe as ear. What's the difference? It's still a body. That makes no difference. They definitely, and they actually want to imagine with a long beard. Did you read Adam how? The Misa after all this Hagdumas that it's emotional, what does it say? And he literally says this. This is poetry was meant to be. All poetry is meant to be imagined, by the way, not said, right? It's meant that you should say Shirayich, and they should say this is who you are. You are not this, but we are allowed by the Nevi'im to be Madam Tzir Aliyah, to imagine you as having a law. No, Rosh Tako is pro this. He's pro against the first part, where you say that you already know what God is and what He isn't. This whole shtickle Torah is for him too much philosophy. It just God is both of these things, and He doesn't really give a theory. You want people that don't think to think. It doesn't work. He does say something like this. He's metamtzim himself, and he's both, and he doesn't really. I don't know. At least you could read it. You could learn Rabbi Shtaka for 5 months and try to figure out what he's saying. I don't know. I think but the Akapunim is against this whole. This is too much of a theory for him. That's for sure. This whole shtickle Torah is much too philosophical for him. God is bist nicht, and the bist ja, die weiß wer es Gott ist, die mechitze, wer bist ja, kleine Tote. Doesn't like any of it. But the Chassidus Ashkenaz theory is that you should imagine God visually, and like the Besetzner Rebbe, at least. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, why would it be kfir? Maybe it's urse, why would it be wrong with it? No, it's not Akshoma. That's not Amatzis. Okay, the Rambam would not be happy with it. Not only that, the Klosmer Rebbe, there's a lot of Yidden. Actually, okay, Klosmer Rebbe was very progress and others. A lot of people were progress at this set. Yeah, he says in one of his Chumash Shirim. Doesn't he? Yeah.
But what about this?
Yeah, how much from that? I'm just on fire! Whatever, something like that. You realize that even the word that he says are Akshama, and then he says this is Akshama. You understand? People are just confused. I'll go upon him. No, maybe not. Maybe they don't understand. Actually, according to Chassidus Ashkenaz and according to Kizri, by the way, it's permissible and allowed and recommended to imagine God in bodily terms. And all Jews do this anyways, they just don't know that they're doing it. So
there's a sophisticated reason for it, right? Because if you don't, you're going to confuse yourself.
Whatever it is.
You don't make the right
you could argue this thing. You could argue that you should, then it's better than the Rambam's way even. Actually, I don't know where I get to this. This is clear that, and therefore you might even. No, it's not Jewish minhag to make pictures of it external to the mind for whatever reason.
They're very against minutes. Even the Kizri points that out. That's Kili.
No, the Kizri actually points out. The Kizri actually points out that we sort of do. The Kizri actually points out. No, the Kizri doesn't have a theory of this. The Kizri actually points out that we sort of do make pictures of God, and we kiss Taifatoris and films and so on, and we say we nishba b'shem Hashem, and we take God's statue, called it film, and we say we're Kitas Chayfetz. Shvi is Bashem, right? How do you make a Shvi Bashem? By Hashem, yeah? By God. You chop on God's beard, and you make a Shvi. Where does the Yudi find God's beard? So if you're a goy, then you find it in a tree. If you're a Yid, you take a Sefer Torah. That's what we do. Yeah, Chvaz, Bilshua Bishmoy. What is his name? By the way, the name is just a word. Name is just a word. Okay. This is first. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Name is just a word. Name is just a word. Name means the thing. Name is always referring to the thing. Name not separate from the thing. That doesn't even make sense. Maybe it does, but it's only if you're like weird philosopher. From all people, name is him. Okay, Kiddush Master, where did we get to all of this? This is another one of those simple things that we confuse.
Yeah, he tells you something, but he shows you a picture to verify.
Wait, I have to just say this. Okay. Sean, that's enough. Wait, I'm saying, the Kitzur Amasa is...
I think so. I don't know if you know better than I would, but I would assume it sounds like it.
Anyways, this story...
When we imagine
No, the Kitzur says why not. He says why not. No, it's I'm saying, but this is not a sheet in Ilchas Zura. All sheet in Ilchas Zura. What?
Criticizing this.
The Kitzur says two things that are contradictory. The Kitzur says one is that with his mushal of the pharmacy, he says that doesn't work.
The pasuk says God is a
There are some pictures that have God in them. The other words, the Kitzur says one like this: a picture actually is not a representation. A picture has the essence of God in it in some way. The essence that's higher than the essence that the philosophers talk about. Anyways, and not all pictures do, and we don't know which. We can only have to trust revelation to know which. That's what the Kitzur's theory actually is. And the other thing that he says is that God decides which are contradictory somewhat theories. But no, the Kitzur says that Avodah Zarah is like going to the pharmacy and taking antibiotics when you need antivirus or something like that. They're both good things, they both work, but they work in a specific way. They don't just work because you think that they work.
But he's also masking.
But he doesn't have a real problem with making a picture of God. He just wants you to make the correct picture of God, and God really looks like Krivim and not like an Eigel. And actually Krivim and the Eigel look the same, so there's not a real difference. It's just about where you put it and how high it is and whatever, if you got permission from an Novi, whatever, something like that. Not about how he looks. God doesn't look anyways. He declares he is master. God doesn't look in any of these ways. It's just how he's represented and so on.
There are two different reasons.
What?
Because he's saying. One reason that
he says in two different Meshulim. There's 2 points. But Akapunim, the Kitzur definitely wants you to imagine God, as do the Chassidah Ashkenaz, as do the Psetzner Rebbe. Everyone else, as do probably most Mekavulim don't want to, and I don't even know why. There's a Leishim about this and so on. I never heard anyone telling me why I shouldn't imagine God. Even according to the Rambam. I know why. According to the Rambam, I know what's wrong with it. Okay, but that 1 second, that's the Rambam's answer. The Rambam will tell you that it's permitted, but there's no use. That's the Rambam's answer. Actually, there is a major use. The Rambam says that it's a use. The Rambam says that it's not enough. It's permitted. The Rambam also seems to think that it's allowed. He just says that maybe there's anxiety. The Rambam does have anxiety on this. The Rambam does say that people don't understand. Okay, actually, there's reasons there. Actually, I could give an answer, but Pashtus it's mitter. Okay. Rav Paskim halt as I make, and Rav Yidin feels like anyways. I was like, we just pretend not to, So what's the point of that? You might as well be my dilemmas. What?
You're saying it's not Shem Malkovich, whatever, that whole...
Yeah, he of course not Shem Malkovich.
Whoever it is, I don't know.
Shem Malkovich didn't quote that Arizal. But, yeah, he does. Yeah. Whoever it is, hold like that, exactly. Yeah, no, it's like, I know the manuscript, it's online. It's like a Licket manuscript of random stuff. It's nothing. Has the Mama Pana in the front. No, it's one of these Tzfas men, some guy's notebook from Tzfas, that's what it is. Who wrote it? I don't know. Maybe someone will find out. But that person holds like this, and shine. And and the regular Chassidim only hold that you should imagine the Shem Havaya, because that's different. Okay. Whatever, yeah. Even the Nefesh Chaim lets you do that. So, and what difference does it make? I don't know. So,
you think it's the Eibishter? You're not saying it's
all magic. So, exactly, nobody thinks that the statue is the Eibishter either. The Rambam says no goy. This is not unlike what the Pulik is. No goy ever thought that his statue was God. It's actually historically true. Nobody. I get a stone created the world. Keine trachten days. They all think that it's a murshal, that it's a slapshis, that it's a shrua, that it's a atzmis begif, or whatever. They all think different things. Nobody thinks that it's God.
And now what's the problem?
And now actually thinks that it's okay. This is all lunch. Kitra Mas is Rav Saadia very explicitly creates Meshulam and says that God does and very similar mashon to what we saw about the soul. And if you think that the soul is very analogous to God or very close to God, which is what many people think, Rav Saadia doesn't entirely say that, but he does. His mushal of the soul is very close to his Shechina, if you think about it. Once you have these two pictures in your head, the ear that's all over and the thing that's beyond the Galgalim or whatever it is something in the neighborhood of the same thing. And therefore, Rav Saadia would probably tell you this, that's what the Mamuri Chazal that have these kind of Imam Melech HaMelech mean, and therefore you might as well say that these are both some kind of mushal or some kind of created mushal. Now, since the soul is a created thing, it might as well be something real like the Shechina. So you have these both sides of the story in the same analogy that I'm making. It's a reason to think that he's not as stupid like we made him last week sound. That he just has, well, it's not stupid, but not as like push it that we made it sound. That it just has a physical soul or material soul. It might be that something more going on. That was my shine. Shine, it's again. No, wow, it's very long.